I'm Sal Amato, the program director of WBMX.com, sitting here with Frankie Hollywood Rodriguez.
Hi.
Armando's on his way in still. He's re-editing his video. He's auditioning for Survivor. So keep your fingers crossed for him. And the man who, to put WBMX together back, when did you actually get the WBMX? It's Lee Michaels, everyone.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think it was around 80.
Cowboy George.
Yeah.
All right, so before you got the WBMX, where were you before BMX?
WGCI.
And how did you wind up at WGCI?
I was working at KKSS. Well, actually, just changed it from KISS to Magic. Anyway, I came to Chicago in '79, late '79, from St. Louis. I was program director, operations manager for KMJM, Magic 108 in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of an urban, mainstream urban, and I came up to basically to be the assistant PD music director, but they gave me a crackhead title of music systems coordinator. Whatever that. I've never heard of that one again.
So you were the first for that too.
Yeah,
Nice,
absolutely. I've been a lot of firsts, but that was one that never made sense to me.
You never see that anywhere else anymore.
Yeah. Barry Mayo was the PD, and
at the station in St. Louis or in Chicago?
In Chicago, okay. WGCI, and I was there for a few months, and then I got an opportunity to interview for a job as a A&R guy for A&M Records. One of the co-owners came through, Herb Alpert, who was on a tour for the Rise.
The Rise.
Yeah. And for some reason, we just kind of hit it off. I did the interview midday at GCI. And he invited me out to L.A. to interview for the job. They were going to start a new division, an urban division. They needed a black guy to be the A&R guy. So I went out for the interview, came back, and I didn't have a job. They fired me. But they knew I was going. They gave me approval, because I asked Barry, and who's the GM? I didn't see him. His name will come to me. But anyway, yeah.
Kearney?
No, not Kearney. No. No, that was Kearney. We talked like that. But anyway, I went out there, didn't get the job. Well, actually, they didn't decide for several weeks later. But as it turns out, they decided not to do it. And in fact, they did a cut and fired a bunch of people. Anyway, I ended up out of work.
Was that due to lack of sales back then?
Well,
they didn't have the internet to blame back then, though.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. It was just
some damn cassettes.
In-house stupidity. Yeah, right. Exactly. This was pre-MTV days. But they. So I came back and just kind of sat around for a couple months and regrouped. And ended up coming to BMX as a morning show person.
Now, how did Barry Mayo wind up bringing you to GCI? How did you wind up at GCI? I mean, did he just call you, or did you hear through the grapevine?
I was hired by the GM to assist Barry Mayo because he was a green PD at the time. This was his second PD job. I think he was down in Little Rock before.
And he wound up at WGCI.
Exactly.
At that time, it was like Studio 107.5, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was called. And I was brought in to kind of be the seasoning to help him mold his skills and make the station more formatted. Because he was the clocks and the rotation and everything was kind of primitive. So I came in and put some systems in.
So when you got to GCI, you had a cumulative experience of other markets, obviously.
Yes.
And each market that you had, was it New York was in?
When I had my first meeting with these guys, I explained to them this is the birth of something that could really be big, but it was up to you in terms of where you would take it. And I strongly suggested to them that it became a company, became one, And they did. They incorporated it and became the HOTMIX 5 Inc. And probably for a lot of reasons, it didn't grow to what I thought it could have been, but it did do phenomenally well as a group. As time went on, the HOTMIX 5, I think they got into the record business, producing, and recording and pressing and distributing their product around the country. But I think what they lost sight of, and this is not a criticism, it's just part of the history, was where they actually came from and the foundation. And I think they all wanted to be something bigger than what they were capable of being or becoming without more coaching, more financial support, more management, because they were growing as individuals. As opposed to growing as a group. And I think that's probably why they didn't succeed for decades. However, regardless of what they didn't accomplish as a group, individually they've done well, and the impact of what they started, what they did, still today, as we sit here in 2006, I've got 3 guys that work for me in Maryland that are from Chicago, that grew up listening to them, and they're all mentally damaged. They're totally, they grew up on it, man. I mean, they were into it. They can recite different things that happened. They were at certain dances. They met these guys, and these guys were, younger than what the HOTMIX 5 are. And it made a major impact on them. When I left Chicago and went to San Francisco, and I've told this story to only a handful of people, but it's a story that will live with me forever. I was a program director of KMEL, which is at the time kind of a crossover top 40 station. Didn't have any mixes or anything like that on the station. I went out for lunch one day on Pier 35, but the station was right near there. And I walked across the street to get a hamburger, hot dog, or something, and there was a guy out there with, you remember those multicolored afro wigs where you see the idiots at football games? Yeah. Well, this guy had one of those on. He was selling cotton candy, hot dogs.
I used to have hair like that. Yeah.
We all did.
It's that Miami Vice thing.
Exactly. So he was, he had a ghetto blaster, and it was loud to the point of distortion. It was just incredibly loud. And I hear this Saturday Night Live, Ain't No Jive, Chicago Dance Party on 102.7 BMX. I said, you know what? I'm getting homesick. I'm starting to hear my old station. And, wow. I said, wait a minute. Hold it. I heard that. I went over to this guy and said, hey, man, what are you listening to? Where'd you get that? He goes, man, my cousin lives in Chicago and sends me tapes every week. This is a cassette. This is the best station in the world. They're going to play the best jams. It's like, you can't get this anywhere, man. This is outrageous. I said, yeah, I know. That's my station. I used to work there. I was a program director. Yeah, okay. You want a hot dog? What do you want? I said, no, man, you don't understand. I said, that's a station I just left, and, I built this whole HOTMIX 5 thing and all. He goes, yeah, okay, right. It kind of rubbed me wrong. So I said, okay, yeah, all right, give me a hot dog and a Coke, and I'm out of here. I go back, I go to my office, I pick the phone up, and I call Mondo. I said, Mondo, I want you on the plane this Friday. Bring out the tapes. We're going to put a mixture on KMEL. And then I went in and talked to the general manager, and I said what I wanted. She said, whatever. If you think it's going to work, let's do it. I don't care what you do. Let's go have lunch. So I brought Mondo out. He was like the first fly jock for mix shows. I don't know, maybe he's the only one. But he brought these tapes out, and we played them. And I went back that next Monday to the same guy. I came back that same day, and I told him I was going to do it. He goes, yeah, okay, cool, I'll listen. So he did. And when I came back, he was completely, his attitude changed. He goes, man, I can't believe you. So you don't realize what you just did to San Francisco. San Francisco will never be the same. Boo, boo, boo. I said, yeah, right.
What sauerkraut?
And then out of his mouth next, what do you think he said? Can you give me some tapes?
Give me some tapes.
Give me some tapes, man. I have been in New Orleans, L.A., New York, Miami, Atlanta, Houston, Texas, and the same thing. the ripple effect for what happened at WBMX in the 80s went all over the country, because when kids came home from school, from college, they got into it and they took it back. And their families were sending out tapes left and right.
All over the world.
All over the country. Dorm parties, frat parties, the works. It was all over the country, and I had no idea that was going on.
Yeah, because you were just here, and then when you got out, you
when
get
you
to
got
realize.
Out, you realize.
Because I told you a couple days. I get an email from some guy in Butte, Montana. I'm like, does this guy want me to come join some militia? What do you want from me, right? Telling me that he had a cousin that lived out here, used to send these tapes out to him, and they used to party like out with moose and bison out in the field back then. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, in Montana.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
I've gotten calls and emails from people all over the world. I got an email from a guy in London about 2 years ago that lived here at the time. And he was from London, was going to school here, and he took that whole craze back there. And if you remember, the mixes and that whole mix thing started coming back from Europe with a little different spin to it, but the concept, I'm not saying that we invented mixing by no means, but the flavor.
well, yeah, it was our way of doing it.
Exactly.
I got to tell you something. When I wasn't the first mixer on the air at BMX, I came on in the second edition. I came but I got something to say about that. Is like when I came on in 82, 83, somewhere around there. I had a meeting with Kenny Farley, and I said we're not getting the props that we deserve. We need to hire a publicist or someone, because every time we went to a convention in New York, they didn't understand what was going on. You know what I mean? Because they all knew who we were. They all knew who BMX was, and they all knew what the HOTMIX 5 was doing. They knew that our mixing style, like you hit on something. You said, I know you didn't invent mixes, but we kind of redefined what mixes were, because a hot mix back then, first of all, it wasn't called a hot mix. It was just it was called a nightclub blend or something.
Right.
What these radio stations would do, like in New York and in LA, they would take the dance versions of songs that were 12 minutes long, 10 minutes long, and play like 3 or 4 of them in a half-hour segment, and that would be their disco blend, they would call it.
Right.
What the HOTMIX 5 was doing was taking 15 songs that were the hottest songs in the clubs and ripping them up in 30 minutes.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Keeping that energy going.
That's right.
That was unheard of.
And then we did the mini mixes.
And it also helped move the music.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're playing.
We went and hired a publicist. We went to go have a meeting with Margie Korshak here in Chicago. It was a huge publicist, still is. I mean, she does work with Paramount Pictures and, Warner Brothers and Sony. She was the biggest publicist in this town. We went and had to show, she had no clue who we was. She had no clue who BMX was. This is a 70-year-old lady living from the North Shore, had no clue who we were. All right? We had to sit down with her for a week straight and describe what we did, show her numbers, Arbitron ratings, try to give her, and then she asked us, she goes, educate her on what was going on, which was hard for someone that's old school like that had no clue what these new kids were into. She asked us, she flat out told us, what do you think I can do for you guys? And we're like, well, listen, we're not getting props around the country. We're not getting the record deals. We're not getting the remixes. We're stuck in a niche. We're stuck in Chicago. We're like, the old blues guys that would sit around on Wall Street and come up with all the riffs, and then the Rolling Stones would make a hit record out of it. Yeah, guys in New York were starting to steal all the stuff that we were doing. We want to get credit for that. We want to have what we're doing go nationwide, worldwide. She said, well, some outrageous number like $20,000, $30,000 she wanted up front. And we looked at each other and said, no way. It's not going to happen. So when you're saying that, I know what you're saying, well, we didn't get that worldwide globalness. And to this day, even, my wife and family members, even Kenny, last week we were sitting around talking going, wow, Paul Oakenfeld's got a record with Brittany Murphy. That should be us. But you know what? Somebody had to be a moron and do what happened at BMX. It just so happened to be us. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We're the 5th Beatle, dude. Or the 6th Beatle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're never going to get that props really what should have been and could have been is because somebody else took it to the next level. You know what I mean?
And you know what? And you're right. You're absolutely right. And maybe the other part of that is the fact that we're in Chicago and not New York or L.A. Exactly. In Chicago, all the record companies had left by then. So it's not like we could go downtown Chicago to Mercury Records or something and say, hey, look, let's do this. This is a Chicago thing. Well, there was nobody left.
There was a couple labels in Chicago that turned their back. There was, you had all the representatives out here. You had you had everybody else, and they were still hiring guys from the East Coast and West Coast to do BMX style of mixes on the new songs that were coming out. And our argument was, you're hiring Michael Graber in New York, great guy, but he has no clue what they're doing here in Chicago in the Midwest. You know what I mean? But they just couldn't. We didn't have that.
It's all about relationship.
It's all about that relationship, being in the right place, the right time.
That's right.
And we're, I hate to say it, we're in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Belushi had to leave, Murray had to leave. They all had to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I've told this story a couple of times too. The guys that didn't make it into the Hot Mix 5, not that they were not good, I just couldn't do more than 5 guys, and 5 was a push. At one time I said, yeah, 2 or 3 guys and I'm cool. But as I was trying to put it together, I said, well, if I only do 3, then this style and this style is not going to be represented. So I ended up with the 5. But guys like Frankie Knuckles, who is world renowned, big in New York, big in London, Germany, and places like that. Well, he didn't make my cut. He didn't bring his tapes in on time. They were bad quality. The beats sounded like a herd of elephants sometimes. They were off beat. So, I don't know if he was at that point maybe just not ready, but he was not consistent. And the guys that made it were consistent. They would bring their tapes in on time. There were times when I had to yell at all of them from time to time to get in on time. But for the most part, it worked out. It worked out.
When you get into the mixes were one thing. Then you had the actual, then you had the radio station.
Right.
Air personalities, talent. You get in there at WBMX, who's the first person that you let go, and who's the first person you bring in on-air personalities?
Wow. Okay, when I became the PD,
even before you even set up the mix shows and everything, because then eventually Armando.
Right.
But who, when you became
Armando was probably one of my early hires in '81.
Mm-hmm.
He was in El Paso, Texas, and he sent me an audition tape, and I said, and I recognized at that point too, what I was trying to do was to reflect the metropolitan area, and we didn't have a Hispanic person on the air. And quite honestly, when he got there, he was less Hispanic than what I was really looking for. But he was a good radio technician. He understood the business, and he could do radio real well. So but his biggest problem was he was shy, and he still is. Still kind of introverted.
Well, you ain't seen him since he's been editing this. You should have seen him swinging from the trees in Costa Rica filming that shit.
Yeah, but see, nobody knew it.
Nobody.
So he could get away with it, see?
There's nobody there.
Right,
except
exactly.
the camera.
So, but, I brought him in. I want to say Steve Gunn, I hired. Another guy from Cleveland, Mike Jeffries. We brought in, now Veronique was already there.
I had a crush on her.
Most people. She was the hottest thing in Chicago.
It was a weird thing.
Midnight.
It was a.
No. I don't remember that, but that's possible. Mike Jeffries? Really? Yeah, I don't remember that, but it's possible. Yeah, real cool guy. Yeah.
So now you got the air personality, so now you start getting structure.
Doug Banks I brought in.
Doug Banks. Now, how did Doug Banks wind up here in Chicago?
Well, I had worked with him in St. Louis. I hired him there a few years earlier, in 78. And he left St. Louis to go to Vegas, crashed and burned, was sitting up in Detroit at his mom's house and was calling me every 15 minutes begging for a job. Mm-hmm. And I guess he caught me at a weak moment, and I brought him down and put him in. Well, actually, I hired him twice at BMX. I'm trying to remember now. Was it the first time? The first time I think I brought him in midday or something like that, or afternoons. The second time, I was on the air doing the morning show, and I was ready to get off. I hated getting up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and staying in the station all day. So I brought him in as a sidekick, and eventually to evolve him into being the host and wean myself off the air. And we did that, and it became Banks and Company. Mm-hmm. So he was the lead guy, and I was one of the cast of idiots on with him. And I knew it was working when we would go out and make appearances, and people started calling me Company. I said, okay, they're getting it. Not all the way, but they realize he's Banks and somebody else is Company. But it was supposed to be a group of people a part of the company. So anyway, I came off the air, and it was operations manager, program director, and that's when I really got my feet into building that station to the mega station that it became. And we did research to find out what people really like and dislike.
Was anyone using research at that? How was research used at that time?
In Chicago radio, not to the degree that I took it to. GCI was doing, Dyson was the GM. I said, Marv, if you want to do this, I said, we're going to have to go for the jugular. The first thing we got to do is to get rid of the HOTMIX 5. We got to take them off the station. Okay? And I began to cherry pick the best of the BMX talent. I brought Doug Banks over, had him on 7 to midnight at the time. Bob Wall was still on doing the mornings. And, we just built this incredible station. Tom Joyner was doing afternoons.
Flyjock, right?
Flyjock. Well, this was even, Flyjock time.
Dallas in the morning.
Exactly.
Here in the afternoon.
And Yvonne Daniels doing midday. I mean, it was an incredible staff. I mean, really. And the station went from the 4 shares straight to the top in like a book and a half. And, it was...
So BMX collapsed that fast.
Yeah. As fast as BMX went up, it went down when we pulled all the major parts from it and put it on GCI. And I was there for about 15, 18 months, left the market, went to KMEL, which I was telling you about earlier. And then when I came back to the market, I came back to BMX. Now
did they ask you did Sonderling ask you
yes.
to come back?
I was sitting in the Californian hotel one day. I got a call from Egmont Sonderling on my hotel phone, and how he found me, I don't know. But he surprised me. He says, "Hey, this is Egmont." I said, yeah. I never thought I'd hear from you again. We fell out over 5 Gs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. He said, you make mistakes in life sometimes. And we went through this whole philosophical conversation. He said, look, have you thought about coming back to Chicago? I said, well, I'll be back there this weekend. I said, I'm closing on a house in 19 days up in northern Marin County. My family's coming out in a few months, and boop-de-boop-de-boop. He goes, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about coming back to work. I said, Egmont, I'm working at KMEL. I got a contract, and, again, I'm getting ready to close on a house. He goes, what would it take for you to come back? He said, let me explain something to you. I've got a deal on the table that's hinged upon you coming back to my station. Now, when you
deal meaning
offer to buy the station.
Okay.
And he was ready to sell because he was 80-something at that time.
So WBMX, it's not that the station fell apart and died. It's
no.
The man who owned the station was ready to enjoy whatever years he had left, and he had a deal on the table for the station.
But the deal was $10 million more than what the station was worth or valued based on the multiples, based on the cash flow and ratings and what have you. When I left BMX, the station was worth, based on cash flow, $27.5 million. By time he had this deal on the table, the station was worth $17 million. So it lost $10 million in value because of the flip-flop in the ratings. He indicated to me that Joe Dorton wanted to buy this station and was willing to pay with $27.5, hinged on me coming back because I was the architect of making it what it was, and they thought that I could do it again. And I said, "Wow, that's that's sensational." And I said, "Well, look, Egmont, it would cost you $1 million to get me to come back." Now, was I asking for $1 million? No, that's not what I meant. It was a figure of speech. He says, "Is that your number?" And then I realized he thought that's what I meant. I said, "Are you serious? You'll pay me $1 million to come back?" And this is a guy that didn't want to pay me $5,000 more than what I was willing to take. I said, "Okay, let me talk it over with my family and I'll get back to you." But before I said that, I remember taking the phone. I said, "Can you hold on a second?" I put the phone down on the bed. I took 2 pillows and put it on top of the phone, went in the bathroom and went, "Shit! Yes! This is unreal!" So I came back out, cool, calm, collected, composed, and said, "Look, let me talk it over with my family." I said, "I got a lot going on here. I got this house that I'm getting ready to close on. I've got a contract." He said, "Look, don't worry about the contract. I know the owner of the station out there. I'll work something out."
Now, were they independently owned out there, too?
Yes.
At that time?
Yeah. Gaffman, they owned a station or two here. 103 something, I can't remember. But they did own an FM station here in town as well. And they were acquaintances. But anyway, he said, "Don't worry about that. I can get you out of the contract. You work out the house situation, but we need you to come back." So I called my wife and talked it over, and she said, "Look, I want to be in San Francisco, but if they're going to pay you that kind of money, we can always go to San
Live in
Francisco."
Antarctica. Exactly. You can always afford to buy the heat. Get the heat.
I went back and talked it over with the management there. The GM didn't like it at all. She went on a drinking binge after that, and she was a wreck. She wanted to have me shot, but as it turns out, Egmont and the owner of the station in San Francisco worked out a deal. I ended up doing a $2.5 million deal, 2-year guaranteed, no cut, no ifs, ands, and buts. All I needed to do was come back, fulfill my obligations, and then there was a bonus package on top of that. If I hit certain things, I would get more money. And I came back. And
now, what year did you come back?
87-ish.
Okay, BMX was kind of languishing.
Something like that. Yeah,
was languishing.
BMX was still, treading water.
All right, now, Frankie, at that point in time, because the HOTMIX 5 had gone through changes.
They had gone over to GCI, and they were still there.
And then the Super Mix. So, Frankie, take it from there, mix show wise, and in the philosophies while Lee was gone, and then when he came back too.
When you guys left, I was part of the HOTMIX 5, but they never really gave
the alternate guy.
No, I was on full time,
right?
But didn't own part of that company.
That's right.
They let me stay on the air with them for 3-4 years, but they never really embraced me into the company.
Right.
I just worked on BMX. I was paid through BMX. I was never paid through the HOTMIX 5. So and actually Julian was the same way.
Right.
So when they made the switch over to GCI, and you're talking about one of my best friends in the whole world, Kenny Jason, who I called him and said, "Hey Kenny, am I coming with you?" And he's like, "No, they only want to take us 5." And I'm like, "You're kidding me. Where's that going to leave me?" And he goes, "Well, fend for yourself." You know what I mean? So I went to Marco Spoon, who was now the PD.
Right.
I said, "Marco, what are we going to do?" He goes, "I want you. I don't want anybody else." I'm like, "What? You're going to do what?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm bringing in all these new guys. I'm bringing in Andre Harris. I'm bringing in a bunch of underground house cats that really had no mainstream. It was very underground, very one-sided type of mixers he was bringing in. And it was the taste of Chicago." And I said, "Dude, if you know that the Taste of Chicago for the past 3 or 4 years, that's our highlight. Yeah. We're going to have 10,000 people by the freaking tent. The city shuts us down. I mean, you can see pictures on the website. I got pictures up there. You can't just have all this underground, whacked-out music. I mean, you got to have that HOTMIX 5 style of music. And Marco told me to my face, he's like, dude, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to change it all up. So basically, everything that Lee laid down to make it a successful place, it was in the hands of some guy that had his own idea. And he wanted to be the superstar. Right. So the way for him to get on the map is, I'm going to throw everything out Lee did. I'm going to rewrite the book. You know, in the middle of the freaking summer when it was our balls to the walls time of the year. So without Marco knowing, I showed up at the Taste of Chicago, and I called Julian, who was not on the radio anymore, and I said, you got to come. They want us. And Julian was working at the jail at the time as a jail guard. True story. And he goes, dude, I'm not giving up this job to go hang out at the Taste of Chicago. I go, dude, you got to do it. And he goes, all right. We didn't have an extra set of turntables. He goes, well, let's stop by this kid's house that's got some turntables. I go, who? He goes, you know, Blaster Bill. That was his nickname back then. It was Bad Boy Bill. So I said, okay, Bill, you're coming with us. He was like 15, 16, right?
Yeah.
And he's in his pajamas, and he goes, well, I got to go to school. I go, F school, dude. You're going to the Taste of Chicago. We're spinning. So I showed up with Julian and Bill. Marco hit the ceiling like, who are these white guys? You know, he goes, I got to have more of a presence with the urban community. We're gonna flip this. I'm putting my own thing together. I go, F you, Marco. If these guys ain't spinning with me, I'm not doing it. As it turned out, they sent everyone home and just left me, Julian, and Bill to handle the Taste of Chicago because when
forced BMX to rediscover themselves and come up with his own mixed group.
So how did that happen when he was over there, Frank?
Well, when he was over there, I mean, the only people that were mixing on the station were me, Julian, and Bill, and then Mike Hitman Wilson we brought on. That's it.
Okay, what about Steve?
No, Steve came on. That's right, Steve came on later. But at first, that's right. At first it was just me, Julian, and Bill. And then we brought in Hitman, and then we brought Steve Hurley over. Bill was like 15 years old.
Yeah, he was a real young kid.
But Bill had something that none of us had. He did something, again, you know, that none of us could do. Bill was like a little trick artist, a trickster. Mr. Survivor just walked in. Armando, what's happening, brother? But, you know, the sad part was, at that time, you had GCI with the HOTMIX 5, the original members of the HOTMIX 5. And I don't think that GCI embraced them the same way that BMX embraced them.
They didn't.
They were just there.
Well, see, the problem with the management there at GCI, while they realized the impact that the HOTMIX 5 had, they never really wanted to give up the full respect to the fact that was a major part of his getting his ass whipped.
Right.
So it was kind of a come on in, but kind of a little standoffish.
Right.
And they wanted a little more control over its content, which I used to fight with Marv Dyson about. I said, Marv, you can't restrict these guys to that degree because that will kill the essence of what they were all about.
He wanted more familiar songs
Yeah,
during the
you know,
mix
play-
show. He
play
wanted
the-
it to
yeah.
represent more of what the station was.
Exactly.
And the sad part was when, again, we did the Taste Chicago, GCI was on one side of, Wabash or whatever the Taste runs on, and we were on the other side. You got to remember how big that BMX name was.
Oh, it was huge.
And I don't care if,
owned.
you know, Jesus and Moses were scratching on the turntables by GCI. Everyone still knew that BMX name was branded in their head.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they all went to the BMX tent. I don't care who was down at the GCI thing. They might have had a nice little crowd, you know,
Right.
but they still went to BMX because that's what they grew up on.
That's right.
You know?
Right. Exactly. And BMX had the best location, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because you come right across the bridge and bam, you're
That's
right
right.
there.
We were
Right
the first
there.
people you saw.
Yeah.
And
Right
and,
there.
and you could always tell because there was mounted, you know, there was mounted policemen on horses, because you know you're mixing 3,000 black kids with 4,000 white kids and 5,000 Spanish kids. Not one fight, not one problem. They're
right.
just all there to listen to the music. You know what I mean? It was
fun.
like the weirdest thing you've ever
It
seen.
was.
You know,
It
we
was a cult.
It was great. We would throw parties, and there would only be 2 doormen for 10,000 people. You know what I mean? Nobody heard of that stuff.
I'm sure Armando will relate to this. When we did the first Hot Mix 5 party, what was the name of that place we did up on the near north side? Da Vinci Manor.
Yeah.
And when I introduced the air staff, you know, it was a very well warm, you know, because we were hot, we exploded. But when I brought up the Hot Mix 5, it might have been a little earlier than that.
That was earlier.
Yeah.
That was earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was earlier.
Yeah, much earlier. It was right after we did it. I mean, they might have been on the air, a few months?
Yeah.
And it was early days of that. Yeah.
You know what I remember? The UIC Pavilion, a Valentine's Day Hot Mix 5 dance party. I remember walking into the UIC Pavilion. The whole floor was packed and just heads bopping up and down.
That's right.
It was incredible.
Not a band, not another artist, nothing but the Hot Mix 5. We didn't even have a super light show. It was 4 turntables, probably a couple thousand watts and some big-ass speakers, and the Hot Mix 5. That's no problems. Yeah. Everybody came to have a good time and to embrace and party to this stuff that they could hear on the radio. It was unreal. I've never seen anything quite like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. Going back to the Taste of Chicago, I remember the days when we used to mix live from the Taste of Chicago.
That's right.
Be rocking the house.
That's right.
Again, that was the only thing that we had left when you left, Lee. Was I remember sitting down with Barry when Barry Mayo's company eventually bought BMX.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he sat me in an office, me and Julian both, and he said, "You know what, guys? Breaks my heart to tell you this, but we're not gonna do the mixes anymore because we're going more adult. You know, we went to NUA or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "It's just I find it hard to sell the station when the mixes are outperforming the radio station. How do you sell that?" And we didn't know anything about radio. We're like, I don't know how you sell it.
Don't look at me, man.
What are you looking at me for? You know what I mean? I'm trying to get laid. So you know, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. But he was such a nice guy, and the way he explained it to us, he goes, "I got to go more mass appeal because of the powers that be that were there before us. I think their egos got in the way. I think the new PDs that came in, and again, I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but when you came back, you eventually left again.
Right.
And then the powers that took over then, again, tried to put their mark in and throw everybody out and let me do my own thing again. I'll show them how to do it."
Yeah, that happens.
2 quick points. Actually, we went more adult under BMX.
That's right.
Before it flipped to
the
V103, because I was
in
doing.
fact, it was an urban AC
Yes.
before it became what it is today.
Yeah, because I was doing 6 to 10 in the evening, and you bumped me back down to part-time.
Right.
Because you're going more adult, and I, at the time, appealed to the younger end.
The street.
Yeah.
Still had the street image.
Yeah. But also, you know, thinking back at BMX, I think actually it was probably the first rhythmic station ever, because it appealed to the mass audience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now they have this rhythmic top 40, but that was actually probably the first one.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier because we were only about 60% black when we first really kicked in, and it grew a little bigger, but I don't think it ever went over 75, 80%, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just giving him.
Step
I'm
to
just
the
talking
mic,
him.
Sal. Okay, my name's Armando.
You just got done editing his worldwide premiere video.
I'm going to win $1 million. Okay, I'm trying to get on Survivor. I'm trying to find the easy way out to retirement. But going back to street hits, I've been trying unsuccessfully. Basically, there were a lot of songs that were played in the mixes, in the hot mixes, that the mixers would only play a portion of. They didn't play the entire song. They played the hottest part of the song and moved on. So I approached Lee about featuring these songs before the mix show, and that's basically how it all came about. And he said, "Go for it," and he gave me the freedom to pick and choose the songs that I would feature
Heaven forbid that ever happen now, huh?
You believe in your people, and I knew Armando was well plugged in. He got it. He understood. You know? That's right.
Well, before the Fiero was the Pinto.
Jeans.
We got to go back to the Pinto now, okay? Can't diss the Pinto. Two-tone.
How many pair of jeans did you have?
Oh, I don't know, but I had my boots, man. Don't forget.
One pair of boots and one pair of jeans.
I came to Chicago saying, man, ain't nobody wearing no cowboy hats. Oh, I'm 81, 82, somewhere around there. All I remember is the fact that I had, true story, a friend of mine had come to Chicago, had some family members in Waukegan, and he came back to El Paso, and he said, hey, man, there's this hot station in Chicago, BMX. You ought to try and get a job. At the time, I'm in El Paso, Texas, market number 80 in radio, and I'm thinking, like, you're crazy. That's market number 3. So I just blew him off, right? And the following week, he came back to my house, and he said, hey, man, did you try and get a job down there? I'm like, are you crazy? But he said that he actually had a dream that I got a job in Chicago. So at that point, I called, I called information, and I actually called JPC, was the first station I called, and I spoke to Sam Weaver. Really nice guy. Talked to me for about 20 minutes, gave me the rundown of what was happening in radio in Chicago. And then the following night, I called BMX, and I spoke to Carla Box. And I remember distinctly that when I ended the conversation with her, I said, well, you never know. Maybe one day we'll work together. And then at that point, I called BMX, trying to reach you, Lee, and I was trying to get direct. I didn't want to leave no message. But the third time, I left my name and my number. And yeah, before voicemail. Yeah, there was some.
Now, what did you think mix-wise? Were you here already when you started? He wasn't here. You had already started the mixes.
Yeah. Yeah. The mixes were already on.
So,
in fact, one of the things that I liked about him, he said he knew how to mix.
Yeah, I was a mixer in El Paso. And, hey, I'll try and find my old cassettes. Graham Central Station and The Place, the 2 clubs in El Paso, Texas. And actually, the owner owned like 40 clubs throughout the Southwest area. And actually, the guy, Freddie, who told me about BMX initially, he was a friend of mine because I had gotten him a job at one of the clubs because I was like the head DJ in El Paso, and I'd gotten him a job at one of the clubs and stuff, and that's how that all came about. But I also had, obviously, radio experience. I had already been an APD at an urban station. My goodness, that was like 1980. And so I had 3 years of radio. I was a mixer, and I was young. I could come on down. Didn't have to spend too much money.
We did fly you in, didn't we?
No. I drove in my Pinto, and I remember.
That's right.
I drove a Pinto, and it made it all the way down here. I still remember coming in on the Dan Ryan.
Right.
Coming in on the Dan Ryan, I said, what the hell did I get myself into? I was like, Lord have mercy, but.
Hasn't changed.
Yeah, so.
Right, so now you've got the mix shows going on. Were you feeling it? I mean, did you know as well when you were on the air doing Chicago Street Hits? I mean, Lee, you had once mentioned that, it was like a big boom box. And it wasn't just Division Street, right, Frank? I mean, it wasn't just it was the suburbs were.
Let's clear that up right now. Division Street was a straight rock and roll town.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? There wasn't one damn bar in Division Street that would play anything remotely close to what was on BMX. And the music I'm talking about, mainstream music, you got to understand, BMX, we were, I'll never forget, we went to New York, we went to a seminar, I went upstairs on the roof, Farley was downstairs on the bottom of a Warner Brothers seminar with Jive Record or whatever, and Madonna was singing to us her new song, so we came back and played Madonna. Farley came back and played Grandmaster Flash. You know what I mean? Which you might think, okay, Madonna, Grandmaster Flash. These were unknown artists.
Oh yeah, and everybody was a kick-ass track at that time.
If you went to Division Street, which was like the quote-unquote in part of the city in Chicago, that was our Times Square, Rodeo
Yeah,
Drive,
yeah,
whatever.
Faces
You have
on
Mothers,
Front
which
Street.
is one of the oldest clubs that have been here. You had PS Chicago, which has been there. You had, Faces, all these other goofy clubs. Not one of those places played anything that was on BMX. So where was it happening? It was happening on the south side. It was happening in the suburbs. It was happening in Indiana.
And in the south, in the city, and like Sowers and
Correct.
Nimbus and
Correct.
The city clubs. But as far as like Division Street really didn't even recognize it till like when Mickey was working there, you were working.
No,
down
I'll tell
there,
you what,
I
even-
was working down there. All the guys were
I'll
working
give you
down there by 84, 83.
I'll give you an inside scoop on that too, dude. I worked at Mothers in '83. I worked at PS in '82.
At PS,
and I'll tell you what,
they wouldn't even allow us to play some of that stuff at PS.
I just had a meeting with Perry Orr yesterday, about doing some work for him again, and I reminded him, and Tony Batoy was at this meeting too. I said, Perry, remember when you came up to me and said, I'm going to hire you for PS, which is one of the most elite nightclubs ever to be in Chicago.
Yeah.
And he said, under one condition. I said, what's that? He goes, I don't want to hear that BMX garbage you're playing. I said, what does that leave me to play? You know what he told me? He goes, dude, all the hot songs, Caribbean Queen.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Nobody's going to dance to that. You know what I mean? He goes, yeah, you play that. You play Pat Benatar, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, all the hot stuff. But none of that stuff you guys play on the radio because I don't want that element here. I go, element? Dude, there is no element. It's such a diverse crowd. It's not, it's not a black crowd. It's not a Latin crowd. It's everything.
And that was the same ignorance in the clubs.
Dude,
that you
they
had
banned
in radio.
it. They banned it. There wasn't one bar you could work on Division Street, and that's when all the suburban clubs were taken off. All the clubs, Mickey was working in Indiana. All the Indiana clubs took off. All the Latin clubs took off.
Hurley was out by me. I was I was on the south side, and then I was in Berwyn at a joint called the Cottage. Steve was down the block. Steve Hurley was spinning at High Rollers.
Right.
In Brookfield. And I'll remember, I'd go see him. We closed earlier than he did. I'd go see him, and here's Steve sitting at the bar bumming. I said, what's up, man? I said, man, son of a bitch ain't paid me in 2 weeks. He had to chase the Greek around for like $33.
Yeah.
But it was starting to happen in the suburbs. 85, 86 was
Right.
when Division Street finally had to come
Do you
around.
realize, and Lee can answer this, so can Armando, do you realize no radio station in Chicago would play Madonna because they didn't know if she was a white or black artist? They didn't know what category to put her in. No radio station would play a rap song because they thought rap was new wave and underground. Smart Bar was the only place that a rap club could play at.
Now, Lee, first rap record you played, do you remember what it was?
God.
I know it. Because I
Well-
think Farley made the play.
Well, the Sugar Hill Gang, we played at GCI.
Armando probably knows it too.
I'm trying to think back.
Well, I'm talking about rap for that time. Grandmaster Flash, Fat Boy.
All I remember is UTFO, the Roxanne, the 11 remixes,
earlier.
The Funky 4+1 More, I remember back in the days. Oh, that's right, yeah.
Because it was an up-tempo record. It was
Yeah.
like, wow.
Yeah.
And that used to blow people. Let me tell you, on the south side, on 79th and Harlem, to the north side, all the way up on Foster and Devon, there was the biggest record, and nobody knew what the hell was
That's
going on
right.
with music.
That, Nucleus,
Whatever.
no, computer games and all that stuff. Yeah, yeah, but there was no other radio station in ever playing stuff like that.
When did Planet Rock come out? Planet Rock.
That was 80. Yeah.
Weapon must be the music.
Julian was over in Anderson.
Dilly gas.
Losing the panel. That was still a gas.
Yeah, that was. But see, at that time, it was different because it wasn't like everything else that preceded it. But by time the harder stuff started coming in, then that was milquetoast compared to where it grew. And I remember taking a few stands on some of the rap stuff. I just didn't want to do it. I was more apt to play a dance song than a rap song. And in fact, during the mixes, I think we kind of had a little governor on how much rap Because Farley.
You know what? It was the one
wanted
summer when he
rap.
came back. Farley, king of house at the time,
Right.
playing the house disco style music. Turns around one day and starts playing Kool Moe Dee, Wild Wild West. And I remember you having a bit of a conniption going, okay, what are we doing now? Are we going more, are we going to do a half hour of rap now in your mixes? Or are we pissing off our core audience? I mean, what are we going to do?
Well, because I used to fight for that balance.
Right.
Because I didn't want to turn anybody off.
See, but the thing is, let me jump ahead a little bit. Today, most of the mix shows reflects what the radio station's playing. So, like, if you take B96 today, 99% of the music is being played in regular format.
Right.
What Lee's trying to say is that, okay, Farley, for the past 7-8 years, you've been playing your own unique style of house music. If you're going to change and play all rap music now, where's your core audience going to go? Because Frank's not going to play it. Mickey's not going to play it. Julian's not going to play it. Ralphie's not going to play it. So it's going to disappear, and we're going to lose it. You follow me? Because when people tuned in to BMX, Armando, they could tell who was on the air just from one song that was playing. Right. Because we all didn't. If it was a real big hot song, yeah, we all played it.
Right.
But you stayed. Then you went back into what you were doing.
Yeah.
That's right. And that was the whole point of having 5 different guys, because they all had their own unique style.
Yeah.
And that's what made our mix shows different from any other in the country. You could go to New York and hear, they do a 4-hour mix and they all sound the same.
Yeah, it's true. And each mixer had a unique style in regard to mixing. I mean, Mickey mixing Oliver was, my goodness, with the blade. I mean, incredible.
Right.
Incredible back in the days. Yeah.
Early digital editing with a razor blade.
The hard way.
That's right.
With a blade and some tape, But we were aggressive with the music back then, because I remember you brought to me Pump Up the Volume. You mentioned it to me, and then I featured it as a street hit on the show. You said it was happening, in the clubs, or you had it as an import or something like those lines.
Again, because all of us were so diverse, and we all worked at so many different types of clubs. I mean, at one point, we all worked in gay clubs. We all worked in all-black clubs. We all worked in suburban clubs. We all worked in Latin clubs. And the music that you had to play was very, very diverse. So I was hanging out one day at Neo's, which was a punk rock bar, which played nothing that we ever played. And I heard the DJ playing Pump Up the Volume on an import. And I said, well, that's a jam. I'm going to play it on the radio. And he asked me, he said, please don't, because it won't be cool for me to do it anymore. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you fucker start playing it, and it's not cool for me to play because my new wave punk fans will hear it on BMX. And
Doctor's cat for the drive.
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, and
Oh, yeah. Nice and wild.
Let me tell you, and it's a trip, too, because I get to consult adult entertainment clubs as well as DJ in one. And like I tell you guys, it's a trip, man. When you go into a set and you got some lifeless girl who can barely walk across the stage in high heels, you play something like All Shucks, or you pull out the Peach Boys, Don't Make Me Wait, and she's on stage, what is this shit? This generation has no clue about it. And that was the majority of the reason why I bothered you so much around the holidays, Armando. Let's do this shit now, before it gets so lost, before nobody knows about BMX, nobody even can recollect half the songs, because in 10, 15 years, look, man, we're going to be falling apart pretty soon. We ain't going to look
I'm
as good.
starting to fall apart
we
now.
Look as good as we look now,
I got a question for both of you, Armando and Lee, both. Answer me seriously. Could a station like that ever happen again?
Yes.
Yeah,
with the right mix, the right marketing approach that would fit today. Could you take that old sound and just move it to 2006? Probably not. But I think the philosophy, the attitude, the right mix for what's happening today, yeah. You just got to have some hair on your balls
That,
and willing to do
if it's that easy, why hasn't anyone done it then?
Because the programmers and management and owners are brain dead for the last 20 years. They're all stuck in a vacuum. Well, what is this guy doing? And you got to remember, corporate radio today, we were independents, man. We were fighting for our lives, for our, just to survive. Now, you got a VP of programming or a regional PD in a format that basically carves out the sound of the company. And the PDs follow. The PDs today are not the same PD that existed 25 years ago. We were creative. We had to come up with ideas. We had to
no budget.
Yeah, zero-based budget. But now you get a budget, and you basically the contest and promotion is created for you, and it give you a memo, and this is how it's implemented. You do it at this time, and boom, 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 boom.
What was the budget for BMX? I know we didn't give away nothing.
Well,
couldn't even get a damn pencil.
Before we blew up, we had no budget, and we would just come up with money based on ideas. I didn't get a $500,000 budget a year. It was I would create something. I'd go to Kearney Anderson. He'd go to the owner, and the owner said, "Yeah, okay, well, I'll give you $20,000, and okay, here's let's trade out the bus signs and trade out a little TV, and and that was it. We'd buy some T-shirts and some bumper stickers, and wish for the best."
Yeah.
But right before we went from that, Armando, what was it before the 6, 9, or 7 share, whatever it was? What do we have, like a 4 or something?
Yeah.
We went from a 4 share to a 7 share in like one book. What happened in that magical book was several things. We really tightened up the mixes, and everything was really gelling at that time, number one. Number two, we did research, audience research, perceptual studies. We did focus groups. We did the whole weekly music studies. And we were playing the hottest shit alive at that point. The jocks were on point. The promotions were on point. We were a great sounding radio station. And it all came together at the same time. I went down to Miami. Kearney Anderson. And I wanted to match him. I said, if you give me $1 million, I'll beat him. He goes, what are you going to do with $1 million? I said, just give me the budget. I'll come up with something. I've always come up with some ideas. I need the $1 million. He says, well, let's look at the ratings. And this is a very, very valuable lesson that I learned out of this meeting. that's what we did.
And the key thing to me is that you could go directly to the owner.
Yeah. It was
The man who says yes or no.
That's it.
No red tape, no Wall Street radio.
Yeah, I didn't have to go sit down with a spreadsheet and do projections for the next 12 months, and we're going to spend $15,000 for this and $12,000 for that and $100,000. No, what do you need?
After, do you even remember what the billing was the year, and then to the 85 year, what the difference in billing was?
I want to say that we peaked around $12 million a year, $1 million a month. Well, I remember hitting the first $1 million month. It was a big deal for us. Before '86, before, yeah, $1 million month. Now GCI had $1 million months. They were doing 18 million, 15, 18.
After getting back, so you came back the second time.
Right.
You only hung out for about a year, right?
A little over a year, I think it was, yeah.
And then you took off, went to New York?
No, I left there. I kind of retired. Went on a little sabbatical, bought a boat. That was in '88. Left right before September '88.
And that's when Barry's group came in and they flipped to NUA, right? Smooth.
Did you explain about Durton Broadcasting?
Yes.
Oh, you already went through that. Okay, all right. I came in late. All right.
That Pinto was out of gas. So now when you left and it flipped, a huge void in Chicago radio because no one picked up the slack. Because that was it
blew off the call letters.
Chicago radio was still living in denial.
Yeah.
Chicago radio was still living in denial, basically, of what had happened at BMX. It never acknowledged it. Never wanted to acknowledge it because it sat there and wallowed in its own misery at like a 3 share while BMX was sitting up there sky high in the numbers. And like you said, now there's a void.
See, I remember being on the street level of it. There wasn't any stations in Chicago doing mix shows from 88 till about 90. Yeah, well, I can't call that a mix show. Yeah, but it was erratic. It wasn't a real show. It was on when it was on, and who knew who was on? Not to discredit the mixers that were on there, because I knew the guys too. It was Edward Crosby and Boogeyman Luna and a bunch of other guys, but they never put anything behind the guys. They never acknowledged them. No. They put them on at 1 a.m.
Right.
No promos, nothing.
I remember running into Elroy at Summerfest up in Milwaukee. At the time, I was managing the rapper Domino.